This day and time. What happened today, years ago?
June 10th, 1940.
Right.
The setting, Piazza Venezia, Rome, and we have Benito Mussolini, the Italian dictator, stepping out onto that famous balcony, huge crowds below.
Tens of thousands. And from that balcony, he delivers this incredibly charged statement. He basically tells them, the hour of destiny for the fatherland has arrived. We enter the war against the old and decadent powers.
Wow. And just like that, with those words, Italy's in declares war on Britain and France.
Officially. Now, you might look at the timing, as the sources point out. France was already under attack from Germany.
So maybe it looks strategically sound on the surface.
Perhaps. But the analysis in the sources is pretty sharp here. It describes the decision as hasty and full of illusion.
Hasty and full of illusion. Okay, why?
Well, because the reality on the ground was completely different from Mussolini's strong words. The Italian army, woefully unprepared.
Okay.
And the Italian people, they didn't actually want this war.
So the statement didn't reflect the reality or the will of the people?
Not at all. And their very first military move attacking France, it resulted in capturing just one small town, Menton. That was it.
Hardly a glorious start reflecting the hour of destiny.
Precisely. And historians, as the material notes, they often call this move a stab in the back.
Which, I mean, given they were jumping in against France and Britain, who were already struggling, that feels like a pretty cutting description of the politics behind the rhetoric.
It does. And the key insight here from the sources is really important. This wasn't just, a bad strategic call. It was a textbook example of a demagogic statement.
Right. Tuyen bomi don, as the source puts it, designed to mislead.
Exactly. Delivered from a position of absolute power, it hid the truth about Italy's situation, served Mussolini's ego and ambition.
And led directly to years of tragedy for Italy.
Prolonged tragedy. And while, history is full of leaders using words to manipulate, the sources really highlight Mussolini's case here. Just such a stark, clear example of the destructive force of words when they're used to mask the truth and serve personal power over the people's good.
Okay, powerful and sobering first example.
Now let's pit it. A completely different tone, different intent. We move forward exactly 23 years to the very same date. June 10th.
Juneteenth again. Wow, okay.
And another leader
Yeah.
standing before the public. But the message couldn't be more different.
This is John F. Kennedy, June 10th, 1963, speaking at American University in Washington, D.C.
And you have to remember the context. This was incredibly tense. The world had just, barely stepped back from the brink of nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right, tensions with the Soviet Union were sky high. Fear was palpable.
Absolutely. And Kennedy gets up there. But instead of, doubling down on confrontation or stoking more fear.
Which might have been the easier political move, maybe.
Possibly. But he didn't. His message was this profound, almost simple call for peace.
Yeah.
For understanding.
And he had that famous line, right? The sources quote it.
Yes, it's incredibly powerful, even reading it today. We all live on the same planet, breathe the same air, and we all love our children.
It's hitting at such a fundamental level, shared humanity.
Exactly. He was urging people, Americans especially, to see the Soviets not just as this monolithic enemy, but as people. People with fears, hopes, people who love their kids, just like Americans did.
And what's really striking about this speech, as the sources analyze it, is how it wasn't partisan. It felt deeply humane.
That's the word, humane.
Yeah.
He didn't use it to puff himself up or whip up narrow nationalism. He even dared, and this is risky, to acknowledge potentially good aspects within the Soviet system. And he explicitly called for peace at a time when, frankly, a lot of public opinion was still very hostile, very fearful.
So it took courage.
Definitely. And the impact, it was real, tangible.
Oh.
Of course, to make it clear, the speech genuinely helped lower the temperature between the superpowers.
De-escalate things.
Significantly. Within just a few months, the U.S. and the USSR signed the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty.
A major step.
Huge. And they set up the hotline, that direct communication link between Washington and Moscow.
Right. To avoid future miscalculations like Cuba.
Exactly.
Right.
And more broadly, global thinking, especially among leaders, it started to shift. Maybe, just maybe, dialogue was possible, not just endless confrontation.
So it's a stark contrast. Mussolini uses words to divide, to push people into conflict based on falsehoods.
Driven by hate and ambition.
While Kennedy uses words to try and pull people together, appealing to shared values, seeking common ground.
Two statements, same date, decades apart. wildly different intentions, wildly different outcomes. It really highlights the responsibility that comes with that platform.
Absolutely. But okay, statements aren't always spoken from a podium, right? Your sources bring up another kind entirely.
That's right. Not all powerful statements involve, spoken words or grand declarations. This next one is visual, silent, but incredibly impactful.
And it comes not from politics, but from innovation.
Innovation in art, yeah. Specifically from the Lumiere brothers. People mostly know them for pioneering cinema.
Right, the moving pictures.
But in 1907, they released something else revolutionary, the autochrome Lumiere.
Autochrome? What was that?
It wasn't just some new camera gadget. It was the first commercially viable process for taking photographs in color.
The first, wow. So before that, everything was black and white.
Everything recorded visually. Think about it. Memories, family portraits, news photos, even images from wars. All rendered in shades of gray. Life visually was kind of flattened,
Limited by just those two tones, as the source says.
Exactly. But then comes autochrome, and its arrival was the statement. For the first time, ordinary people could see their lives, their world themselves, captured in full, true color.
That must have been mind-blowing.
Totally. The sources give these lovely, vivid examples like seeing a young girl's actual rosy cheeks in a photo.
Instead of just gray?
Or the golden light of the sun on an old man's face, or the specific green of a field behind a soldier's uniform. Details that black and white just couldn't capture.
So the images themselves became the declaration. What was the unspoken message?
The unspoken message, as the sources frame it, was profound. It was like these images were saying, without needing a single word, I lived, I was here, and I have feelings.
That's powerful, connecting emotion to the visual record.
Deeply. It was, as the material calls it, a declaration of sight. No language needed, no slogans. Just the look of the world in color changed how people related to their own past, their memories.
Color photography suddenly becomes this vehicle for emotional connection.
Absolutely. It made the past feel closer, more intimate, more real in a way. Autochrome really kicked off a new era, an era where emotion wasn't just in the stories told about the pictures, but captured by light itself, right there in the picture.
A silent brilliance, the sources call it.
I like that phrase. Silent brilliance captures it perfectly.
So okay, we've seen three very...
Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more history daily.